Recording in progress.
Time is 6:30 on February 27th, 2025, and I'm calling this Planning Commission of Emeryville meeting to order. That was the correct order of words. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair. Commissioner Chafe did inform us in advance that she would be unable to attend this meeting tonight, so she is absent. Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
Commissioner Rivera.
Here.
Commissioner Small.
Here.
Vice Chair Henry.
Here.
And Chair Wax.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, moving on to public comment for items not on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, moving over to 4, approval of the action minutes for December 12th, 2024.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Vice Chair Henry to approve the December 12th, 2024 minutes, seconded by Commissioner Martinez. Commissioner Chafe is absent. Commissioner Martinez?
Aye.
Commissioner Rivera?
Aye.
Commissioner Small?
Aye.
Vice Chair Henry?
Aye.
And Chair Wax.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Item 5, Community Development Director's Report.
Thank you, Chair. A brief report for you this evening. Council action since we last met in the City Council on January 21st held a study session on free little libraries, effectively to develop a program to allow them in the right-of-way at minimum cost to project proponents. The council also received its annual report on Measure C affordable housing bond expenditures and the affordable housing program. And the City Council reorganized some council committees, including merging the Transportation and Sustainability committees into one council subcommittee, and made appointments to those committees. On February 4th, the council proclaimed February as Black History Month, and the second reading of the ordinance combining those committees, because the Transportation Committee is an entity that's created by a city ordinance, and so that required an ordinance amendment. The February 18th meeting of the City Council was canceled, and they only held a closed session on that date. Some events that are coming up, Black History Celebration is planned at the Senior Center on February 28th at 11 a.m. That's a members-only, Senior Center members-only event. There's the Nature Pop-Up series of events. The next one of those is on March 1st at 10 a.m. at Doyle Hollis Park. That includes free native plant giveaway for attendees and tour of the community garden. And that is part of a series which various different kinds of nature-oriented events in various parks and locations programmed through June 1st. And then lastly, the commissioners are invited to the Total Wine and More preview party and ribbon cutting. That's going to be Wednesday, March 12th at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And I'm going to be sending you an email either tomorrow or Monday with a registration link should you wish to attend that event. A few announcements to note. The city reached a major funding milestone for the 40th Streetscape project a couple of weeks ago with the award of $13.1 million from the MTC Safe Routes to Transit and Bay Trail program. That was the top scoring application in that round, and so great work by the Public Works staff. Construction is proceeding, staying with the theme of Public Works. Construction you see is proceeding on the Sustainable Streetscapes on Hollis. Excuse me, that program or project includes pavement repairs, sidewalk bulb outs to shorten crossing distances, bus loading areas. The utility location work is what's going on out there now, and the construction of that project is going to take us through June. Last but not least, you probably saw the news that Sutter Health acquired the Biomed portfolio of properties, which is a portion of the Chiron PUD, planned unit development, I should say, for a planned $1 billion medical center. We are expecting just very preliminary project information sometime in late March, and we expect that this project will entail amendment of the planned unit development, new final development plans, or FDPs, and of course the associated environmental review. So this will be the subject of many future planning commission meetings, I expect, and it's a very exciting development for the city. This concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Chad, did that sale, is that going to be in the 2024 books? And if so, is it going to be subject to the real property transfer tax as we outlined in Measure O?
It is my understanding that it will, and it will be, it's my understanding that it will hit in the fiscal '25 year.
That's great. Thank you.
I don't, correct me if I missed it, but I asked before about the Art Center update.
And my apologies because I don't recall and I'm not prepared for that. But would, can you remind me the context in which,
I was just asking
just a general update, like an agenda item? Or,
a general update on what the status is. I did see the item about the city council's approved new construction, but I guess it would be helpful to just know more a little bit about that.
yeah, an in-depth discussion could be the subject of a future planning commission. I will, if you got the gist of the update, is that we completed an analysis. The council directed to go for new construction and the full project and not phase the project, which entails much more money than we have available for that project. I can report that we circulated an RFQ for a fundraising consultant pursuant to the city council's direction. We received proposals for that last week, and the Art Center Advisory Group is scheduled to meet Tuesday after next to discuss that further. And then we'll proceed with a contract, with a scope of which is yet unknown, since it was an RFQ that we circulated.
Okay, and the question I asked earlier is about the public market space where the art event is held, and whether that had been investigated as a potential.
It has not been investigated in depth, and the direction thus far from both the advisory group and the city council is to continue with the project at 4060 Hollis here.
Okay. The other question I have is I saw that Tesla has withdrawn their application. Is that meaning they are not intending to submit for that, or what is the word on that?
Tesla has withdrawn, and it has no plans. They have not indicated any plans that they will be coming back. But that doesn't mean that they may not reconsider.
Okay, thank you.
No more questions from commissioners? All right, then, moving on to 6, disclosure of ex parte communications and identification of conflicts of interest. Do we have any? All right, then. 7.1, general plan annual progress report.
Good evening, Chair Wack. Good evening, Commission. My name is Navarro Oaks, Senior Planner. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you all yet, so very happy to be presenting on our General Plan Annual Report tonight. I'll be presenting on the first part for the General Plan itself, and then Valerie Maxwell will be presenting on the housing specific portions of the project, or report, rather. Oops, keep doing that. Apologies. Here? Oh, this is the Zoom? I'm doing great. Thank you, Chad. Oh, that's super embarrassing. Yeah. Now I can go from the beginning. Okay, we did it. All right, thank you, Chad. All right, teamwork. That's what we do here. All right, so the general plan annual progress report, this is something that's required by the state. Every year we submit it to HCD and to OPR. It goes, the housing portion has a presentation from Valerie to the housing committee, and then you see it, and then the city council gives an approval to send it along to the state every year. And all jurisdictions are required to do this, and it's how we track implementation of general plans statewide. So this is just a summary of development decisions. There were a lot of projects this year that did not have actions that you would like track because there wasn't like final occupancy issued or a permit, but that doesn't mean work's not happening on them. It just means there wasn't something recorded at the benchmarks that we report to the state. And then there were projects with actions, and notably ADU development is significant in the city and continues to be. So some of the things that you all saw this year and might be familiar with and were the women's shelter permit that was extended and then the temporary shelter permitted to take over the place of the women's shelter. For ADUs, there were 9 planning applications submitted, 4 building permits issued, and 22 units received certificate of occupancy so they could actually have people move into them. And of course, the 9 planning applications that were submitted are not the same ones that got the 4 building procedures and the 22, right? These are rolling items that continue each year, but it gives a good snapshot of our progress. And then 5900 Hollis, of course, is a commercial space converted to 2 live work, so that it continues to show the transition of commercial to other uses as well. We didn't have any general plan amendments this year. And for the general plan actions, so as you're probably aware, in the general plan, we have 79 actions that we track progress on. 7 actions this year had no progress, and the report you received said 8, but that was a typo there, so it'll be corrected when it goes to City Council. And then 18 actions have been completed, and for 54 actions, we made progress on them. So they were either kind of ongoing things where it's just something we stay active on, or we actually like did work on it to move those items forward. So for the 7 actions with no progress, that would be locating a new police facility, things that are generally no progress almost every year. It doesn't change a whole lot. Greenway Creek and water feature improvements that are demonstrated in the general plan as potential options along 53rd Street. Developing new sign regulations has not been a priority of the city. Working with stakeholders to explore trail options and at the Emeryville Crescent. And then funding facade preservation program was not a priority this year, and working on uses for sites that are no longer needed by public agencies. So those things we didn't make progress on. Doesn't mean it won't happen next year or a future year, but those aren't things that are moving forward this particular year. What has been completed, and most of these have been completed for a number of years or things that might come and go as showing as being completed. So for a number of years, we've had a strategic parks master plan completed. We prepared and updated the design guidelines. We prepared them a number of years ago. Last year, we received the update, but we don't update them every year, so that's a typical thing to demonstrate as completed. And then update and implement the 5-year CIP. We show the CIP is completed, and then on years it's updated, we show that it has work in progress. So what are some highlights for the 54 things we did accomplish? Significant areas of improvement were along the 5 capital projects. We only had the CIP in place for a year, and we already have the streetlight pole repair and painting done, storm trash, drain trash separators installed, electrification of the city's vehicle fleet, and then the railroad quiet zone, which is really, really notable because that was in the works for a long time. So that actually appears under several of the 54 actions because they overlap with each other. So you'll have something show up in community safety and also maybe land use development or transportation. So it'll show up several times. So the quiet zone is mentioned repeatedly because it hits different benchmarks in different areas of the general plan. So Public Art commissioned 8 visual art grants, including 2 gateway murals. And something that we haven't been able to list progress on for a really long time is farmers market. And this year we did have a farmers market again, first time, I believe, since COVID. So that was pretty exciting for us. So you can see some things are really development oriented and some things are more community service oriented or features that we want to see in our community. And so I'm going to hand it over to Valerie Maxwell. And with the Valerie Bernard, I'm just a mess. Wrong Valerie. I'm going to excuse myself.
Good evening, Valerie Bernardo, Community Development, Economic and Housing Coordinator. And I'm here tonight to talk to you guys about our 2024 Housing Element Annual Progress Report, as well as our Low Mod Income Housing Accessor Annual Report. So in the Housing Element Annual Report, it is a extremely large document. There's a variety of tabs that we have to fill out. And the way that the state divvies up the tabs are based off of the categories I'm gonna illustrate to you right now. So the first one is our housing development application activity. So in 2024, 4 applications were submitted that proposed 11 units. Again, accessory dwelling units, you'll hear that several times tonight, were the primary source of those units. All of those units would be designated for those who are above moderate because there's no financing source restricting them to lower income households. Related to completed entitlement activities, we had, and I'm sorry because that is covering up my information. Maybe I can't get rid of that. Okay. We had 4 applications that were submitted that represented a total of 8 units. One of them was a duplex that was proposing to build 2 new units. And then we had 3 applications, all proposing 2 additional accessory dwelling units. Again, for a total of 8 units that were completed. So they all received their actual entitlement applications in 2024. Building permit activity, this is how the state captures our regional housing need analysis. So we only get credit for units that are permitted. We had 3 building applications that were submitted that received building permits in 2024 for a total of 6 units. Again, 4 of those were for accessory dwelling units. 2 of those were adding additional units to our multifamily projects. Could have been an ADU. Most likely it's just an additional unit that was added to a multifamily unit. And then when it comes to our certificate of occupancy, we had 12 applications that came in for 22 accessory dwelling units that all received their certificate of occupancy in 2024. So where are we related to our progress? Our goal is to get to 1,800 and I can't see it, I think it's 45, is our total RENA allocation. So for 2024, we produced 6 units. That's 6 units that were permitted. So we have 1,671 units to go. Now, that is a lot of units, but we have a long way to go. This starts our progress from 2023. We have until 2031. So we're about 8% towards meeting our goal. And we do believe that we'll have some picking up in the future, but right now it's just been a very slow year. We have within our housing element 48 programs. Each one of those programs has a variety of different objectives that we're required to report on. So one of the additional edits that you'll see from what was submitted to you versus what will go to the what will go to the city council is related to the implementation of our housing programs. In the past, we've been able to report on our housing programs on a program by program basis, which is how it was submitted to you. They have changed the requirements and they now want us to submit based on each individual objective. So the revised version of Table D will have, just like it's identified here for this one program, a line for every single objective and then the update related to that exact objective. So within our housing implementation programs, we have 5 programs that we have completed actions on. Again, this started in 2023, so we've already completed 5 of those. Those 5 activities will convert to ongoing actions. And an example of one of those programs is our preservation of our BMR ownership portfolio. Within that program, we identified 4 different objectives. We were going to issue our housing bonds. We were going to continue to do our principal place of residency compliance. We were going to ensure that our homeowners are complying with our BMR resale agreement. And we were also going to work on funding a BMR acquisition program where the city could actually preserve and save BMR units that were going through foreclosure. Related to those 4 activities, we actually sold the Measure C housing bonds in 2023, so our BMR acquisition program is active and operational. We did not acquire any units in 2024, but we have done that in 2023 and prior to that. We did do our principal place of residency monitoring. That's something we do on an annual basis. Those letters did go out. We received a 70% compliance by the end of 2024. Those homeowners that had not responded have until February of 2025 to confirm their compliance. And then we had 6 BMR units that were put up on the market for resale. The city, through our consulting services with Hello Housing, monitor those resales to ensure they're complying with our marketing guidelines, approving the new homeowners, and also ensuring that the sales price is something that's affordable. When it comes to our programs where we have actions that are initiated or in progress, there's 23 programs that fall under that status. One of them, of course, is our accessory dwelling unit program. We have 4 objectives under that program. One is to continue to implement our Article 14, Chapter 5, Title 9, which is our accessory dwelling unit regulations. One of the updates that we did make this past year was the Planning Commission and City Council did do modifications to those guidelines to comply with the state mandated changes to our ADU laws. Additionally, the staff ministerially approved 3 applications. We approved 3 entitlement applications. We issued building permits for 2 applications and certificate of occupancies for 12. So we're continually implementing this objective. One of our additional objectives is to develop ADU guidance material. We have been working with our ADU Alameda County Collaborative Group to ensure that we are understanding what all the various changes are to the ADU laws, because they are coming on an annual basis and changing very quickly. So we're trying to make sure that collectively we're all understanding them and potentially could come up with some collaborative ways of how we want to best implement it. So we are participating in that group. The Alameda County has developed a website where all jurisdictions a homeowner could go and look and see what the requirements are for any jurisdiction in Alameda County. That is operational, but in addition to that, the city is currently working on drafting guidance material for the city of Emeryville specifically, and that information will be uploaded onto our website, and there will be a specific page on our website in 2025 related to accessory dwelling units. We've also identified to establish an ADU construction loan program to support the development of ADUs to make them affordable to our lower income households. This is a longer term goal, so we don't have any action related on that. It's something we'll probably look for in the next 3 years of trying to put something together to support that objective. And then lastly, we identified that we wanted to host an ADU open house for our existing owners of ADUs as well as prospective owners to talk about best practices, see how ADUs have worked here in Emeryville. When we created our housing site element report for the housing element, we only identified that maybe we'd have 30 ADUs over a 10-year period. I think I talked earlier, we had 22 ADUs that received their certificate of occupancy last year. So clearly there is a huge need, and it's coming in ways that are very different than you may find in other jurisdictions. One of those ways being our multifamily units. We've had 1 application that is completed adding 15 accessory dwelling units by utilizing underutilized parking space and community space to convert to 80 units. We have 2 additional projects that submitted applications in 2024 that were multifamily projects looking, again, to take underutilized space to convert 80 units. And we've also been in communication with another multifamily developer who also is looking to potentially submit an application in 2025. So what we have decided to do from all the lessons that we've learned is, 1, we went and took a tour. We wanted to see how is this being done, and is there guidance that we could provide to additional multifamily developers. But 2, we recognize potentially holding an open house isn't the best way of doing it. So we're actually looking at commissioning a videographer to come in and to put together a video that we could use as a marketing material. It could be on our website to talk about ADUs in Emeryville and how it can best be supported. We have 11 programs that we identified as ongoing activities. So these are things that we always do, we're gonna continue to do. There's nothing new or specific about it, but it's something that we will continue to do throughout the housing element cycle. One of those is the update to our site inventory. That's a part of our housing element. We are required to update the site inventory list on an annual basis, posted on our website. It is on our website. There's a link under the housing element to finding the site inventory list. We're also required to continually evaluate residential development applications against that site inventory list in case there is a project that we had identified that is going to come in with a different realistic capacity related to density. What we will say is in 2024, we had an SB 35 application that was submitted. That site had proposed in our site inventory the development of 300 housing units. However, that application is coming in at 362. So we didn't have a reduction in density. We actually have a project coming to produce more than we had estimated. We tried to create conservative estimates, so we're happy to see projects come in with more, and that's what's happening there, and that's the Christie Avenue site project. And then third, if there is a project that does have, that does come in requesting a reduction of the project density that was identified in the site inventory list, we are to make written findings. That'll come back to this commission. And if we go below whatever our RENA allocation is, we are required to identify an additional project. We don't anticipate that happening. We actually identified more units than is required to get to our RENA, but that is a statutory requirement that we're required to implement. And then lastly, we do have 8 programs that we have not taken any action on yet. It doesn't mean that there won't be any action, but here in year 2, we just have not gotten to them. So one of those programs is our live-work units. We talked about wanting to assess our live-work regulations to see if there's any modifications that can be made to encourage the development of more live-work units. And then we also talked about wanting to educate our owners of live-work units who are potentially looking to sell those units, making them aware of our down payment assistance program so that we can expand the pool of affordable housing options to the market. Nothing has happened related to that quite yet. It will be something that we'll continue to work on in the future, maybe in 2025 and 2026. Now, the second part of my report is our Housing Successor Annual Report. This is a report related to our low mod income housing asset funds that the Redevelopment Authority used to manage. The city is a successor agency, so we're now required to submit this annual report, and it's required to be submitted as a part of the housing element and general plan annual report. So for the 23-24 fiscal year, we had deposits totaling a little over $576,000. It ended our balance with $19.5 million as our ending balance in that account. We did not spend any money in 2024. Our real property assets within this account total $17.9 million. We have loans and grant receivables totaling $20.4 million, and we have about $1.6 million in unencumbered funds. There's a variety of tests that we have to do related to the low mod income housing asset fund. One of them is our extremely low income test. The requirement is over a 5-year period. We have to ensure that we're expending more than 30% of our funding on housing for extremely low income units. That 5-year period actually ended in 2024. We actually expended 48% of the funds over the past 5 years, which is about $2.8 million towards housing units for those who are extremely low income. The second part of the test is ensuring that we don't spend more than 20% towards housing units that are at 60% of AMI, and we actually spent 0. So we've met our extremely low income test. The second one is to look at our production of affordable housing, and this is related to all of the affordable housing in the city of Emeryville, whether it comes from funding through the mod income housing asset program or not, over the past 10 years. So it's a rolling look back. So over the past 10 years, we have produced 0 senior restricted housing units. So we are in compliance and ensuring that not more than 50% of the housing that we're developing is built for seniors. The third test is our excess surplus test. This requires us to look at our unencumbered funds related to our past 4 years of deposits. So what they want to understand is we're getting deposits related to our loans every year. People are making payments through our old home buyer loans, housing rehab, old multifamily loans. Are we receiving more in deposits than we're putting out or we're committing to other projects? So that's the analysis that has to be done. So over the past 4 years, we've received about $2.7 million in deposits. Our unencumbered funds is about $1.6 million. So we are determined to not have any excess surplus funds. If we did have excess surplus funds, then we have 3 years to figure out a plan to commit those funds to an affordable housing project. And then the last assessment is looking at our inventory of our homeownership units that were assisted with the low mod income housing fund. We currently have 145 units still within our portfolio. No units went through foreclosure in 2024. We had 1 unit that did a payoff. It was at $222,429. That is not only the principal of the loan, also would have included some interest. And then we're currently in contract with Hello Housing to manage our homeownership portfolio. So they're the ones who do the compliance, who also issue the payment letters, do subordinations, and they do that in consultation with the city staff. With that, I am available, and Navarre, I'm sure, is available. If there's any questions on the general plan, housing element, or housing successor annual reports.
Commissioners, questions? Vice Chair?
Yes. Thank you for the report. The many impressive accomplishments. I was most interested in the non-action items that you didn't mention, which I believe was listed as A, H, K, O, and CC. One of them was about special needs, another housing for disabilities, Section 8 assistance, housing development regulatory programs, and then Development Opportunities Fund. Could you speak to those, please?
Sure. I'm going to try to remember all of them, but please remind me if I forget one.
Okay.
So the Special Needs Opportunity Program, that is funded through the housing, the Measure C housing bond. We have closed those bonds, we've issued those funds. However, we're not at a place where we're ready to launch that program. So that'll be something that'll most likely happen 2026, maybe 2027. It's very possible that funding related to that program could happen earlier because we have some projects that are in the works, potentially that need some funding. They have not come in and asked for it, but if we get that request, it's very possible we'll move that program further. Our Development Opportunity Fund, that also was funded through the Measure C housing bond. Again, those funds have been issued. That funding is made available to a project as it becomes available. So we wanted that funding to be extremely flexible. If there was an opportunity to acquire, if a project came forward needing money that we weren't aware of, that money is sitting there available. So there's no action because there has not been a request coming forward related to that. You talked about the development, there's the affordable housing program, and the development, I'm trying to
Housing
remember.
for disabilities, Section 8.
Okay, so housing for disabilities, there's a variety of actions we have related to housing for disabilities. We have not moved on any of those actions because we have not gotten a variety of interest or any applicants coming forward. One of the things that we have done is we did do an RFQ that was released earlier this year, was drafted in 2024 to bring on consulting services. One of the intended utilizations of those consultants will be to do an analysis of our planning regulations to see, are there modifications we can make to incentivize creating more accessible units within our planning regulations and make additional modifications to our planning regulations. So a lot of that work will come once we actually get to that analysis. Again, we just did the RFQ. I believe responses are due next week. So we'll see some movement on that in 2025, but in 2024, unfortunately, we just didn't have it. Section 8. Section 8 is a huge one. We have currently been waiting for over 2 years for the Housing Authority to provide availability of Section 8 vouchers. They have stated for over 2 years it was coming, and in 2024, they issued a notice saying the vouchers are not coming, and we will also not have them next year. So because those vouchers are not coming, we really right now don't have any actions that we can take on trying to incentivize people to go after vouchers because the Housing Authority currently doesn't have any available to provide. I think I'm still missing a program.
Housing development regulatory programs, is that?
Housing development regulatory. So that also goes back to the consultant. They're going to be doing a deep dive analysis to see what modifications we want to make to our affordable housing program as well as our community development bonus program. Those two are tied together because the affordable housing program requires a certain percentage of affordable units. I believe right now it's at 12%. And the community development bonus program goes above 12%. We're going to be doing an analysis to see whether or not we can increase that percentage of affordable housing units above the 12%. Also, whether or not we can set aside or create an exception to where somebody is serving people at an extremely low income unit, maybe they don't have to do the 12%. We're trying to figure out, are there different ways we can pull levers to increase affordable housing, but also to make sure that it's being built at lower incomes. One of the things I think we'll also be looking at is the delineation between the units that are going to be moderate rate income versus affordable, and doing a new assessment that's hasn't been done in quite a while, and that's one of the projects the consultant will work on.
Thank you. One comment on the disabled housing. If a project is going through TCAC, it automatically has a 10% accessible unit requirement, which is much higher than the baseline.
Yeah.
So once it's a TCAC project, you're pretty much assured of a lot of units. I was curious in terms of this conversion of multifamily space, like parking, into ADUs or additional units. Sounds great. What are some of the examples? Have any of these been completed?
So what we have done so far is we did have a preliminary analysis looking at all of our vacant commercial space to see what is out there. One of the things that we weren't anticipating when we put that program together in our housing element was some of the changes that have been made to the accessory dwelling units. Because of some of those changes, the accessory dwelling unit laws may actually be utilized in order to convert some of these spaces into residential development. So it is a little bit of a pivot than what we thought we were going to do. There have been some other cities that have done some assessments on how to future-proof the development of parking structures so that it can be converted into a residential use in the future. We want to do a little bit of analysis related to that as well. It's not in our short-term goal. It's something that we would more so look for in maybe at about another 4 years or so, because we have a lot of different projects we're trying to do. But we want to see what is possible and then what modifications we would need to make to our planning regulations in order to make that be something that would be a requirement in the future.
But have there been any multifamily developments that have completed these?
Not that I'm aware.
Not yet.
No.
Can you give us some of the examples of places that are asking for it? I'm just curious as to what kind of community is thinking of doing this.
So I believe the assessment that I had read previously was either Santa Clara County or San Mateo. I don't recall which
I
one it
see.
was, but that was the one who had done an assessment of how it could be done.
I see.
But I don't know that they've moved forward with any changes to their regulations either. And I'm actually going to ask my colleagues because that's more their space than mine, but.
With other jurisdictions have changed their regulations so far. I don't know specific jurisdictions off the top of my head. I do know there have been some conversions in Southern California, I believe Los Angeles, but I don't think they've changed their regulations to reflect that in any way. The only place where we've had conversions of parking to residential are the multifamily across the street at the bridge, where, as for the ADUs, they did convert some of the parking spaces in their ground floor garage into residential. Now, that's not a multi-level garage, but that is, I think, indicative of the demand and the direction that development will be going in the city.
Oh, I see. You mean along 40th?
Correct.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, pretty cool, huh?
That's interesting. Where are they located? On
On
40th?
the inside of the development facing the parking lot.
Okay.
I forget exactly where, but they converted the ground floor commercial space into residential, and it kind of wrapped, and they extended that. And it also, one of the interesting things about it is it does create some design challenges because you have things like support pillars. So it does create some unique design features for those units.
Yeah, sure. Well, if you do a future-proof study, I'd suggest you make sure that you have a structural engineer that's providing input into this, because it's a very big deal, that aspect, so. I'm curious, it's great that all these ADUs are being constructed. Do we know what the total number of ADUs that have been completed in Emeryville are? Yes.
Till date, total number that exists?
Yes.
We'll have to find that. We don't have that number ready.
Yeah, I'd be really curious, because obviously it's a great way to increase affordable housing on existing sites, so that's great. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the great presentation, and glad to have my finger on the pulse of every single thing that's happening in the city. I'm just curious, like philosophically, are our responsibilities as the successor agency to the redevelopment agency in terms of housing, so the low income, moderate income housing asset fund, are those expected to wind down at any point? Because I feel like with the rest of the successor agency responsibilities, the aim of the state was to just like, let's get these out of the way now. Let's move some responsibilities over to the county. What happens? Like at some point, these funds have evolved so much that they're like, are they gonna become all unencumbered at some point? Like what are they thinking that we're gonna do?
So they do continue to recycle.
Yeah.
So as loans are paid off,
Yeah.
then that money is now available and we have to put it back out there
Under
for
those,
use.
all those same rules and reporting requirements.
For the most part, yes.
Okay.
It's not the same level of reporting that was required prior to the dissolution. It's just this annual report. But a lot of the rules that we put for our regular affordable housing programs follow what we would do for the low-income mod funds as well.
Okay, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I know it is it's an extra layer of responsibility for staff to track things in a certain way.
I think we have been lucky in that a lot of our funds have revolved. When I've looked at some other jurisdictions, they don't have as many funds that are coming in.
Right.
We're getting people paying off their loans.
Well, and I very much appreciate and I see that our staff is tracking funds that are coming in, and especially encumbered funds that need to be spent, because we just saw what happened with the county where they have to return development impact fees. Oops, for not spending them. But I'm glad that our staff is on top of every penny that needs to go out the door. Thank you.
Good evening. It's nice to meet you. And, you know, I haven't been on the Planning Commission for very long, so I'm kind of catching up a little bit with how Emeryville does a lot of its housing applications. I know there's not a lot happening right now. Market is not great right now. The ADUs are fantastic. I'm really glad to see that happening. But I'd love to get a sense of your perspective, especially with the housing element being relatively recent, and, you know, we kind of came out of a market cycle for a little while. How much you've sort of seen applications, and maybe when things start to pick up again, you know, we'll kind of see what comes forward that really meets the zoning where we have it, and how much development applications tend to come in and kind of look towards state bills like state density bonus. It sounds like SB 9 is not really used here because we don't have single family zoning so much. The lot splits are not a common thing. But ADUs are certainly a state program that's become just much more prolific in California in general. But do you sort of anticipate that the way that we have a lot of our either planned unit development processes or some of our existing programs here will kind of meet some of those needs? Or do people tend to come in and sort of say, I need a bonus, or like they sort of do that larger scale of what the state offers?
Great question. I don't want to give you the wrong answer. I'm going to defer to
I can take
my
that.
colleagues. Thank
I
you.
can take that. Just for context, the city's density bonus system is far more robust than the state density bonus. So even before the down cycle, the number of applications seeking state density bonus were very minimal. In fact, till date, there's only one multifamily residential program that has opted to use state density, and that was for different reasons, not because they were trying to maximize their density. So the city's density bonus is far more robust in terms of maximizing the intensity and the density on any site. In terms of what is coming, there are some sites, like 5850 Shell Mound that's at the corner of Shellmount Avenue and Christie Avenue. That's still vacant. I mean, there is an existing vacant building that a residential development was contemplated, but they moved away. There is the Wells Fargo 5801 Christie site that, as things pick up, we would anticipate something coming in. So there are a few sites, and this is Emeryville, and you never know what's coming, just like the Sutter Hospital.
Yes. But it's a very good sign, actually, that, you know, our local programs are really meeting those needs, because that means we can also be much more specific about the benefits and opportunities of the projects coming in, because a state density bonus often gets used to get around, to carve around some of the local controls, whether it's, you know, bulk and massing and all kinds of other requirements. So that's really interesting. I was wondering also, in terms of the housing element, whether I noticed the streamlining was sort of a little more in the orange territory. So I was wondering if there are streamlining changes that you anticipate maybe coming forward too, if there's anything that needs to still be like, you know, advanced that will help applications go through.
So we are working on developing a policy for how we will process streamlined applications. And then there's 2 additional objectives that we're looking at. I think it is the removal, and I'm looking at Navarre, it's a planning issue. So it's the removal of the appeal hearing. Currently, there is a process to have a meeting to determine if you can have an appeal hearing. And so that is one of the changes to streamline, is the elimination of the meeting to determine.
Yes.
And then I think we were also looking at smaller units, was it 2 to 4?
Yeah, some of the things are to assess whether making, like in the RM zone, for example, 4 or fewer units, either by right or with just design review, not necessarily needing to come to planning commission, so to streamline that way. There's a couple different ways to assess opportunities and looking at if we should change thresholds for, you know, square footage and things like that, if there's a way we want to modify that. So there's different opportunities. I will say that when we were going through this process and being assessed by HCD, we're such a small and unique city that a lot of the streamlining tools that are out there are not applicable to us, because there's 3 planners.
Right.
We're already streamlined by who we are. Like,
Lack of complexity, yes.
yeah, I mean, we don't have a single-family zone here, and a lot of the things that are aimed at streamlining are really aimed at cities who are inflexible. And I think we're pretty flexible here already. So there's just some things that are not we're not able to be in our toolkit. For example, can we have a designated person that all they do is ADUs? Well, we do have one person who processes ADUs, but they do other things because we're small, right? So some things that they list as opportunities are not really available to us.
Yeah, and I would say SB 330, where like you can only have 5 hearings, like I can't imagine that you max out on too many hearings with things too.
I mean, what that has done is change the amount of committee meetings that things have gone to. So previously, almost every project would go to BPAC and maybe transportation, you know, and that doesn't happen anymore. They get updates about when things are going to Planning Commission, and those committee members can go to that. So it has changed how we review things, absolutely. But I don't think it's compromised the process because of the way we're already set up. And we're, of course, always looking at ways to assess and improve as well.
Great.
And the consultant that we did the RFP for, we're looking for a bench of consultants. That'll also be something that they'll be looking at for us.
Yeah, and I think it's really great to get the update on the ADU process. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves. I think that's been incredibly productive in California. I will be curious to see whether individual townhouses decide to replace their garages with some units. That would be a very interesting test of, I can't quite see it yet, but it'd be really interesting to see if that happens. The HOAs will be interested in that, and you know, I know they don't have control over it. What I have seen, I mean, San Francisco definitely does garage replacements in multifamily. It's almost all in historic buildings because they're often soft stories. So they're like fixing their structural problems at the same time they're adding units, and finding also that a lot of people are just not having as many cars in a denser place. So it's a little less applicable in Emeryville, I would say, just historically, but I'd be curious to see. I mean, garage conversions are really hard, right? Especially with more modern garages where the floor-to-floor heights aren't great and the structure's really heavy and big. So, and there are ramps, which is hard to live on. So thank you. Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you so much for the update and for all the staff work and that goes behind all the reporting. I know it's a lot of complex material to summarize and then provide us, so I appreciate the work. It's nice to see the ADU numbers bumping up. Not surprising to see the lack of construction. I think that's kind of indicative of the market right now, very slow with high interest rates. So I do expect that in the future, this will pick up. So nothing to worry about now. I did have a question about ADUs as well, and future programs that have been recommended by council. I don't know if, I'm just wondering if council has recommended pursuing, I think it's AB 1033, that allows condo conversions to ADUs or ADUs to be condos. It was a state law that's optional for cities to opt in, but kind of provides more ownership opportunities for folks to have more ownership of small condos. So I'm wondering if that was recommended by council or if there are plans to pursue that.
I believe originally we had put in our regulations that we did not want the sale of ADUs. My understanding is with the change in the state law, we are no longer allowed to prohibit the sale of ADUs. So I don't know if there's anything specific that needed to happen or whether or not that was done with the updates we did last year, but I thought that it was a new state requirement.
That was my understanding as well.
Okay, great.
So I believe when we did those modifications, we had to strike that part, that the sale of ADUs was prohibitive. I believe that was removed from our planning regulations, so it's now an allowable use.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, there are limited circumstances under which separate sale is allowed. I would say as a general rule, it's still not allowed in your typical single-family residence with an ADU in the backyard. That's still, separate sale is still prohibited, but the state law did add additional provisions that would allow separate sale in certain limited circumstances.
Any further questions, commissioners?
If I might make a suggestion, I think having a study session on ADUs might be very educational for all of us here. I'd specifically like to hear, you know, how many and the sort of trend of how many have been built over the years. I'd like to know how well they're working in terms of people's reaction to these units and what kind of rents are happening for these places, and it obviously seems like an important program for Emeryville, and it's a great way to provide additional housing at relatively low cost or relatively low difficulty. So if I could suggest that, I don't know how the others feel, but I'd like to know more about it, in other words. So, thank you.
I'll just add the Housing Committee is also interested in that. They wanted ADUs to be one of their focus this year as well.
In terms of how well they are working and in terms of rents, I'm not sure how easy that information would be to gather. We can't just straight up ask. I mean, we could ask, but you know, if they don't want to answer, they don't want to answer. So that would be a little bit challenging. I just would like to mention that.
What I will say is that we have put together a survey because that would be just good information to collect for us to understand. It is one of the tools that the state does allow us, that if we're aware of the rental rates and it is below a certain segment, we could then identify that unit as being not a market rate unit, but a lower income. But it's the collection of that data and the fact that it would be optional. We have put together a draft survey that could go out. We have gone and asked some preliminary people who have built ADUs. We did not get any of them to respond to the survey. But we need to figure out maybe a better way to incentivize people to answer this optional survey. But that is something that we would like to collect more data on if we can figure out a better way.
I'll add to that we've talked about collecting that as part of the planning and building permit application process for people voluntarily providing what they plan on charging. So that would be a way of collecting data. Now, how accurate that would be in long term, we don't know, but it'd be one data point we could collect at that point in time. To your question earlier about how many ADUs, I don't have the full number. In the report, we have 32 that we show permitted. I will say the bulk of our ADUs have occurred in the past 2 to 3 years, largely because of the changes allowing it to multi-unit. It's been a significant change, and that's really where we have the opportunity for growth in Emeryville, and it really impacts us more than other jurisdictions that have smaller percentages of overall housing and multi-unit. So the 32 is probably a good, that's like a big base that we have there. And then beyond that, you know, we can get you the more specific numbers, of course, but having the multi-unit has just been a game changer for ADUs in the city. And I think Emeryville shows that much more disproportionately than any jurisdiction I've heard of.
There actually is a state presentation that's been done on ADU developments in California and the bridge development of the multifamily, converting that parking into ADUs is one of the spotlight projects that they actually have out there when they're talking about ADU developments around the state. It is an Emeryville project.
And I do also want to include that it's part of a bigger trend of just converting underutilized commercial space, whether or not that's by ADU or conversion to live work or conversion to condos, which we've seen all of that happen in Emeryville. And prior to the ADU regulations changing, we had conversions of ground floor space that was underutilized into additional residential units. So, and that was during our last housing cycle. So it's been going on for a while now. So it's a bigger trend, and I think that's really important for us to identify and see and continue to look at opportunities, although at some point those opportunities are gonna run dry because we'll have maximized that. But it's very interesting.
And I'll also add there is a small downside. So in the past, before the ADUs, when we had underutilized space converted into additional residential units, if that happened at one of our existing properties that had a below market rate regulatory agreement, we were able to extract affordable units out of the conversion of those units. When utilizing the ADU law, we can't do that. So we are generating more units, but the city cannot restrict them for affordability purposes, even though it's within an existing project that has below market rate units.
Also, because it doesn't require a conditional use permit, we aren't able to work with the property owner to make more units, say, you know, disabled access or something like that, even though they're ground floor. So it does feel like we might be missing some opportunities for housing types that are really needed and that the city wants to see. We're getting more housing units, but the trade-off is that we don't get to get these specific housing types that we need.
Adding to one more thing, since I think we are having a little study session right here. Another sort of side effect, which may not be exactly positive, is that a lot of these multifamily residential units, which are using amenity space to convert into ADUs. So when they were initially designed and approved, the amenity space was part of that approval. But just anecdotally, these amenity spaces are kind of underutilized, which is also the reason a lot of these developers are seeing that and looking for an opportunity to use underutilized space. But it does reduce the amenity space which were originally designed, and there's nothing we can really do about that. So something to keep in mind. It's not all positive.
Any further questions? Do we have any comments from members of the public? No? Okay. Any comments from commissioners? All right, thank you for the presentation. And we're going to close this item and move it on to 7.2.
Chair, if you might, we would like a recommendation for the city council. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll make the motion.
Bringing this back. 7.1, yes.
I will move that we forward this item to the city council with, were there any comments that we wanted to attach to? I think it was a great report. Yeah. Obviously, ADUs are going to be a big topic. Just warn them. So that's my motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. On the motion by Commissioner Martinez, seconded by Commissioner Small, I will call for a vote. Commissioner Chafe is absent. Commissioner Martinez?
Aye.
Commissioner Rivera?
Aye.
Commissioner Small,
Aye.
Vice Chair Henme,
Aye.
and Chair Wax.
Aye.
Thank you.
Now actually moving on to 7.2, Planning Commission composition.
Hello again. Let's see if I can get the presentation started properly this time. Nope, I already messed it up. Okay. I just shouldn't have said anything from the get. I appreciate that everybody's coaching me through this. Like, you can do it. All right. So I'm just looking for the way to make it full screen. Where is it? Bottom right, you said? I'm not going to pretend like I know what you're pointing. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Hello again, Chair. Hello again, Commission. All right, so why are we here talking about committee composition? So the City Council adopted this as housing cycle. We were just talking about that, and which was a program about improving resident engagement. And City Council, this also came up in their Budget and Governments Committee to review the composition specifically of the Community Grants Subcommittee to enhance community representation. Well, you don't just look at one committee, you look at everything, right? So these are kind of going in lockstep together at the same time. So the City Council directed the Budget and Governments Committee to consider adding demographic questions to the Advisory Committee and Commission application. And so as one of the tools, and these are all things coming together at one time. So Housing Program Element EE talks about evaluating current committees and commission membership to determine if that membership is reflective of the city overall and what voices are missing to look into that. And if it's determined that there are missing voices, what will the city do to enhance outreach efforts to be more inclusive and to make sure that there's representation for everyone on committees and in interacting with committees. So that is what we're doing. They talk specifically for the Housing Committee to ensure that the committee has at least one member that represents and resides in a BMR unit, and at least one member that is a tenant, and at least one member that is a homeowner. So for the Housing Committee, it's saying, hey, these particular voices are needed on this committee. And there's other committees that also might feel that there's specific voices that they need, pardon me, specific seats for, and other committees that's not necessarily relevant. But that's part of the discussion that's going on and happening at all the committees and commissions right now. So a survey was done, and it was completely voluntary, but it was sent to all commission and committee members. It was open for 6 days. It was anonymous. There was a 65% participation rate, and there were 7 questions. So this slide just shows what the participation rate was, and at that time, there were 7 members, and there were 6 responses for Planning Commission, so good job. And looking at age, I understand this would be easier as a bar chart, but it wouldn't let us. So this is just showing the distribution of age. So the majority of people being between 20 and 64, so underrepresentation of seniors and youth. So one of the questions is, what are your pronouns, looking at gender, and there's a pretty big split there. And then racial and ethnicity representation. There was a disproportionate number of white participants. And then what part of Emeryville do you live in? I understand this would be more useful if we could tell you exactly what the proportion of city residents was, so you'd have the ratio. I don't have that information specifically, but you can kind of look at the zones that we divided up the city by and think about what type of housing is there and where you have multi-unit and where you have less smaller unit development. And then household income level, you can see here that, again, there's not as much on the lower end spectrum here. And then 9 of the 30 respondents stated that they had children in the household. So where are we in this process? Right now, we're sharing the baseline results, which is what you saw of existing committee composition with everybody and asking for recommendations. And then we're going to share the information that we get from the community advisory committees and commissions back to City Council and see what sort of changes, if any, people want to take on. And then annually, we're going to send out the same kind of survey, completely voluntary, to see how things change over time. So questions for your consideration tonight. Are there socioeconomic and diversity voices missing from your committee or commission? So in this case, from the Planning Commission, right? We're asking you about this body tonight. And should the city add the diversity questions that were provided to the committee and commission applications? Obviously, be voluntary for anybody applying as well. And then, are there any specific viewpoints related to the Planning Commission's purpose that are specifically missing? So that's kind of talking about designated seats. That's what that's getting at. And then any recommendations to improve resident engagement or expanding marketing efforts to increase participation in the Planning Commission. So those are the things we would like you to consider this evening. I had a bullet point that I wanted to bring up about that I've forgotten, but when it comes back, I will mention it. I'm doing so great tonight, you guys. I'm just doing so well. Do you have any questions about that before we move forward, before you begin your discussion? Okay, thank you.
Commissioners? Yeah, I suppose. Do we have any public comments on this item? Seeing no public comments, let's move on to commissioner comments. Who would like to go first?
I guess this is a little bit more of a question, which is really about how youth may be engaged in some of this process, right? I know often, they may not be old enough to participate more formally, although I think there's certainly a little bit more on that end of the demographic that could be participating. But obviously, a lot of the planning decisions, big decisions that get made, have a long-term impact. And engaging them, especially when it comes to things like, I don't know, sea level rise or really long arc, and getting them engaged obviously allows for, further sort of civic commitment. Just wondering if there are existing programs or things that you do already, or if there's ways that could be considered.
I'm not aware of existing programs. I do think that we have probably unique opportunities here that have not been adequately explored because of having ECCL and having a school district so close to City Hall. So that's certainly something that I think we could work on with the school district, but those relationships need to be built and opportunities need to be identified that are reasonable and manageable for everybody. But I absolutely think that that's something, at the very least, we could figure out ways to communicate better when decisions are being made, and that kind of civic education of anybody can participate in local government. You don't have to be a citizen. You don't have to be a resident. Anybody can come to a meeting and speak. And I think that's very empowering for youth, and that they need to get that message, and that has not, to my knowledge, been done sufficiently in Emeryville.
I think it's fine to add diversity and socioeconomic questions to our questionnaires when people are applying to be on the Planning Commission. I would caution against holding special seats for any specific group. On this commission in particular, having sat on the City Council and just wishing for more applicants every time there was a vacancy, it's really, really hard to add more rules to the process. It would greatly hamstring the City Council in their ability to pick the best applicant at each specific point in time when they understand the current composition of the Planning Commission. So I think it's great to collect the information. It's great to ask people what they feel comfortable identifying about themselves. I think there's definitely an opportunity to have socioeconomic diversity on our committees, because what tends to happen in cities is that people who are either retired or comfortable have the time to participate. And that's the tough thing, is when people have full-time jobs, kids, many obligations, or a disability, for instance, that might hinder them from coming in. Sometimes that's also related to their socioeconomic status. So I do see that, if there's a way to bring in people of all class levels, I think that would be an overall positive, but I wouldn't separate the Planning Commission work from any other work that you're already doing to increase engagement from other committees. This planning commissions are generally composed of people who have some previous expertise in the planning process, or just really love land use for some reason, and there are just not a lot of those people. And so, like, any layers of filtering that you put on top of that will make it just very, very difficult to maintain a functioning planning commission, in my opinion.
I remembered the bullet point that I wanted to bring up. Thank you. I was like, ooh, that's it. Something that has already been determined is if seats are designated on any committee for a position, it would say designated thing / community member. So it would not be limited, it would be prioritized. So just so you're aware. But again, it is definitely more relevant to some bodies than others. So.
It's not legal, is it, to limit a seat in any kind of way on the basis of any of these criteria? Is it?
I was waiting for that question. Thank you. So yes, and agreed, and to an extent, obviously, the city could do exactly what Navarre is explaining in saying, okay, well, we want one seat on the planning commission to be for an Emeryville business owner, for example. That's not a protected class, right? But there are certain categories that are in your presentation tonight that obviously we could not, set aside a seat for a specific person of a specific race or something like that. Those are protected classes, and we don't, the city's not going to classify seats based on those categories. But, the city could, if it wanted, set aside a seat for an Emeryville business owner, for example. There are non-protected classes that it could use. But most of your presentation today is more about demographics and racial makeup of our committees. So, but excellent question, and I appreciate you asking it.
Okay. So my answer to these questions, number one, is I would say yes, that, and I would also say yes to the second one, and as you mentioned, it's a voluntary answers, and the answer to number three is we don't know what that viewpoint might be because of the answers to the first two questions. In other words, if there are, for example, a very working class resident in part of the neighborhood that is not represented on the commission currently, and perhaps of a different race, that viewpoint might be different than what we're hearing from the current members, but we don't necessarily know how that would be different. I think it's valuable to have a wide range of viewpoints to a planning commission. I agree with the point that it's not easy to find somebody that might be interested in it, but it would be great if there is. So that leads to the fourth question, which is any recommendations? I think the marketing is important to do. I suppose I would have to say maybe hard copy mailing might be the easiest way to reach some of these residents, because it would not necessarily be something where they'd be looking on website or digital media to, you're not going to have somebody who's, I think I'm interested in the planning commission. That's how they'll find out about it. So it might be marketing in, for example, the community center, the schools, the senior center, or something on that order. Yeah, but that's the tough part, is how would you find somebody who could expand the diversity of our commission and who would be interested in serving?
To that end, definitely the socioeconomic diversity questions are related specifically then to 4, right? How we can do better outreach to increase representation, right? So if we're doing surveys and over time we find that, just for example, okay, one neighborhood is consistently underrepresented, that tells us something that there might be a problem there, right? Or why is that? You know, it gives us a question that we can work on. So that's the connection there. So I just wanted to make it clear that the intention of the diversity question is to see how we can improve outreach and improve participation.
And that could also mean professional background on the planning commission as well. Because what we don't want is all 7 of you being architects, for example. You know, not that I have anything against it, but but that, just to give you an example of what that diversity means in terms of viewpoints.
I just to this point, kind of with this conversation we've had earlier too, which is planning commission is, those are words that mean something probably to a layperson in many ways. Like it's a little bit like I would need to know a lot to be part of that. And I think it's really important that lived experience is seen as an expertise. That in the way that we ask questions and the way that we invite participation is to say that you come in as an expert with the experience that you've had on planet Earth and especially in Emeryville, and that is in itself a gift and a value in the conversation. And other than me spouting off a variety of state bill numbers, I think it's actually really important for people who are very unfamiliar with the process to be engaging with the conversation about how land use is done and how housing is done and what it means to them. And so I think that it really does require some of these kinds of open conversations in the way that we start to engage and do that marketing so that people feel like they're entering into the process standing on a strong platform, that they're not coming in and feeling like a novice and that they're somehow at a disadvantage to participating in a public dialogue.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. And thank you for the presentation. I think it's a really good insight to have on the makeup of the commission and makeup of the committees. My take on asking for these questions, I think they should 100% be asked, and it's great data to collect. But I think there also should be some open-ended question of how lived experience relates to how you could perform on this committee and how it relates to your insight and your perspective and your expertise of your lived experience, and that having that open-ended question and ability to discuss that at your appointment would be beneficial, just to share what part of your lived experience, your age, or other demographics, statistics contribute to your perspective and how you see planning, how you see the world. And I think that's a valuable question to include as well.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I'm just going to go down the list here. Obviously, the answer to one is yes. And to Vice Chair Henme's point, what perspectives we're missing are, of course, something that's kind of unknowable. We can identify some, but without more study, what exactly we're looking for, I don't know. Question 2 is a yes. We've already addressed the concerns about how much more difficult it is to recruit when you have slots that are very specific. Something that I think most of us in this room have experienced in Emeryville, whether it is with the Planning Commission or with the various advisory committees, which are constantly churning members. And as far as the marketing question goes, or kind of expanding that to like building the pipeline of public participation. Right, and I think that you're always going to get like some random people who just happen to take an interest right at the right moment. But you know, we have all of these advisory committees that are a great way to build up individuals, but most people don't even know about the advisory committees. Advisory committees being much easier to get into, and you serve on one of those, and it is frequently the case that you move on to the planning commission or the city council. We have to get people into those first. They have to know the meetings are happening first. And so, you know, this question has come up in, you know, several meetings that I've been in Emeryville, and my answers are usually the same, like we have to do some like marketing basics, right? Obviously, you know, mailing people has been put out, but like literally things like, do we have a flyer box at bus stops? Do we have a marquee like anywhere? We don't. Do we have ways to just let people casually know about these meetings? Can we basically get someone's attention as a city and use that attention that we've gotten, because this is the way professional marketers do it, right, to then draw them into public participation, get them to show up. And that is going to be, you know, the best way to find out what perspectives we're missing, certainly, and it's going to be the way that we get those perspectives regardless of whether or not they decide to serve. If they are showing up, they're bringing their perspective to the meeting, which is, you know, just about the most important thing. And many of those people will then convert to butts in these seats. And so, yeah, a lot of it is just basic stuff and taking the approach of, can we use all the different ways that we get people engaged with the city as opportunities to build a pipeline of civic participation? And that's pretty much all I have to add to this conversation. Do we have any more comments?
Thanks, Chair Wax. You raised another point that I guess I would make is, if there is a person from an underrepresented group that is interested, then you may have only one opportunity for them to apply, meaning if they were to apply and be turned down, that's probably it. So to have such a person be successful in getting onto either a committee or a commission, they need mentorship. And they, for example, just the advice, oh, perhaps you should serve on a committee first before applying for the planning commission. And then if they've done that, applying to the commission, they should talk to one of us. You know, here's how you should put your application together, and here's how, you know, you can have a better chance, and maybe you should go to visit talk to these various people. The city council is the one who makes the approval, so maybe they need to talk to some of these. So in other words, you want to make sure that you don't blow that opportunity, because like I say, if somebody is interested and they get turned down, then they won't come back.
And if I may add, since we are having this discussion, you know, sometimes the best way is word of mouth. And those who have served in the past, especially on the committees, that would be in my mind, the most effective way both to kind of introduce the concept and then also direct them to, you know, to us. And then we can kind of explain more, because residents and you guys live in this community and meet a lot of folks. So whatever at city staff we can do, we will do. But I don't want to, I think this word of mouth is an important venue as well. Thank you.
Maybe a year ago, I was talking to a staff member in the Community Services Department who was interested in developing, I don't know if it was events or some sort of community meetings to introduce people to public service and the opportunities at the city for volunteerism and all of the committees. I don't know if this person was just speaking off the top of their head or if this has actually come up in any interdepartmental meetings, but I think that would be a natural space if there are events that were catered specifically to how to get people more engaged. This was someone who worked at the ECCL campus, so you know there's naturally a lot of families and parents and people who are there for other reasons and engaging with the staff there. So that could be a good opportunity. I know maybe 2 years ago, there was a big influx of ECDC kids moving into the school district, and they all came together, and they had some very involved parents who maybe could get roped into various more responsibilities. But it was great to see.
Any further commissioner comments? Is there an action you're looking for off this item? Okay. Well, in that case, thank you, everyone. Closing 7.2. Planning commissioner comments. Any comments this evening? Vice Chair?
I just had one question about the farmer's market, which was mentioned. Are there plans for future farmer's markets?
Yes. I don't recall the details, but there absolutely are talks, and has there already been permits submitted to your knowledge? Temporary one? No, okay. But yeah, there absolutely, I'm sorry, there's absolutely been talk of having more farmers markets. They'd probably be seasonal, so not so much like you're looking at something like Berkeley where you have the same thing year-round, same place all the time, but perhaps more seasonal things in different locations. Seems to be the direction we're currently moving in, and if those goes well, establishing more permanency. That is my understanding.
It has been a few months since I heard. I actually think I heard directly from the vendors, but when I heard then, they were planning on coming back to public market in like April, which seems like a great location for it. Any other comments? Well, that just leaves adjournment at, what time is it? 7:56. Thank you, everyone.
Recording stopped.